Well, for his analysis of those by-elections in New South Wales and another bruising Newspoll for the Prime Minister, although far better than many predicted, I want to say, let's bring in the national editor at the Australian newspaper, Mr Dennis Shanahan. He joins me now from Canberra. Dennis, I'd like to start, if I can, on those by-elections. Fair amount of talk around today that the result in Gladys Berejiklian's old seat of Willoughby shows the Liberals are under threat from so-called climate-focused independents in these well-to-do suburbs. Former Federal Treasurer of the Liberal Party, Michael Yabsley, he went so far as today to call the Willoughby result a massive hemorrhage. But have a look at these numbers. Berejiklian won 57% of the first preference vote in 2019. The well-credentialed Liberal candidate Tim James, well, he's sitting on just under 44%. Compare those numbers to the electorate of Manly after Mike Baird similarly stepped down as Premier. Baird won 68% primary vote in 2015. His replacement, James Griffin, won 44% of the vote in 2017's by-election. Now, that's a bigger swing in Manly than Willoughby. Now, I get it, not helped at all by Matt Keane, the New South Wales Treasurer, trying to blame his government's vote on the weekend on the Prime Minister and the Morrison government. How do you see it all?
Oh, look, I think that what people say about state elections, state by-elections, having not a great deal to do with the federal seats that they inhabit is true. There are local issues, there are state issues, and there are also, by definition, retiring local members in by-elections. But I think that overall, it's obviously not a good message either for the Liberal state government or for the federal coalition. It's obviously a strong vote for Labor. And in Willoughby, in Gladys Berejiklian's seat, all sorts of things could have been going on there. Labor didn't stand a candidate, so it would have gone to the independent. And so we have all sorts of swings that are exaggerated. In Monero, the Nationals held the seat. In Bega, of course, the government, the Liberals lost the seat for the first time since it was created. So that's obviously very bad news. But again, a lot of retirements, a lot of impact here on local issues and state issues. Not a great deal you can see with an impact on the federal election, except that one of those retirees, former State Minister Andrew Constance, is actually going to be a candidate for the Feds in Gilmore, and you would think that on his own standing, he would have a fair chance of winning the federal seat. The other interesting seat, or what I find to be the most interesting seat in those by-elections, was Strathfield. Now, this was a Labor seat held by the former Labor leader, and yet there was a swing to the local new Liberal candidate. It was only very small, but when there were massive swings away from the government in every other seat, there was a tiny swing towards the government in that electorate. And I think what's interesting about that from a federal perspective is that that is an electorate which is so within the so-called faith seats of the federal government. They are the seats which strongly voted against same-sex marriage and which will be bitterly disappointed, as the Prime Minister has said they were over the weekend, over the failure of the Religious Freedoms Bill. So I think that it's interesting, in Strathfield, there was a swing to the government, to the coalition, in a very high faith, ethnically diverse area, and I think that really makes it an interesting result. Whether it overlays into a federal result's another matter. But I think each of those seats had its own message to send to the federal, Labor and coalition parties.
I think in the last one too, though, it shows the power of a good candidate, a very strong, locally known, locally connected candidate. And of course, this is one of the federal government's issues in New South Wales. They've got many seats that haven't got candidates yet. Let's go, if I can, to Newspoll. Primary unchanged for the coalition at 34%. Labor's primary steady 2 on 41. Albanese's net approval, Anthony Albanese's net approval has fallen 6 points, significant drop. The PM has lifted by 3. Do we read green shoots here for the coalition?
Look, I think that obviously, first of all, on 34% unchanged, the coalition is in dire straits. However, you would think after the last two previous weeks before this Newspoll of nightmare scandals and text messages and the failure of the Religious Freedoms Bill in the Senate, a great deal of pressure on Scott Morrison, that the primary vote could have dropped more for the coalition, and it didn't. I think what's most interesting here and when you're looking at Newspoll, look for significant changes. And in this poll, there were 4. That is 3 points change. One was Anthony Albanese's dissatisfaction. It went up. Another was his satisfaction. It went down by 3. And he lost 3 points on preferred Prime Minister to Scott Morrison. The other 3-point move was a drop from double figures at 11% to just 8% for the Greens, and that 3% went to others. Now, I think this is a very interesting internal analysis of those Newspoll numbers, because what it suggests is that Adam Bandt's aggressive campaign on trying to say the Greens will call the shots for a minority Labor government in a power-sharing deal is actually hurting Anthony Albanese. He's been trying to reject this all along. The government has been very tough on this in the last week of Parliament. And Adam Bandt can now see himself that part of his problem is by seeming to be a deal maker with the Labor Party, he is losing potentially soft green votes to those independents in the others column, those voices of who are very pure politically and don't like political deals. I think this is ultimately, of course, a bad poll for the coalition. But there are interesting signs there of divisions on the left side of politics, which have been overshadowed for months, years, by the divisions on the right side of politics.
Well, we'll see what happens, whether there's a lag to this poll or not. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of green shoots there for some in the coalition to at least build on. Dennis, as always, thank you for your time. Thank you for your analysis.